wasn't really already out in the ether.
Let's start off with, who are you?
My name is Allison Wood. I am the daughter of Bill Bell, one of the three founders of Pickleball. My father, Bill Bell, and Joel Pritchard were the parents with the annoying children who were bored and wanted something to do. And then a little while later, a neighbor down the beach, Pleasant Beach, where we lived on Bainbridge Island, came and helped us develop the game more, helped them develop the game more. Barney was a marketing guy. My Uncle Joel was a congressman, so he was busy, and my father was, it turned out, with the CIA, so he was busy, and we lived in New York and then overseas.
Can you share us any recollections of that day when pickleball was created?
I was 6, turning 7. But I do have recollections, because even though I can barely remember playing that first time when all the older cousins and family members, the Browns and all the Pritchard kids and all the teenage kids on the point, we always wanted to play too as younger children and weren't often asked to. But of course, over the years, we all played constantly. The Northwest, which was Seattle, down to Portland, even as far over as Sun Valley. All of the people who sort of navigated in those worlds had a knowledge of pickleball, or maybe had a pickleball court in their driveway. So it was a constant. And no matter where we lived, in New York City, when we lived there, my father introduced the game in a little indoor tennis facility in Brooklyn Heights where we lived. When we moved to Australia, he did the same thing. When we moved to Indonesia, our backyard was a pickleball court, and a lot of the parties that my parents threw all revolved around pickleball tournaments and games, and I wish I had some pictures to show you. When we moved to Hong Kong, we played it at Hong Kong International School, and they did it also at Singapore International School. So it was always a growing, but very slow growing, fun game to play. Very different than the pickleball of today.
How does it contrast from today's pickleball?
Well, first of all, it's gotten incredibly competitive. Pickleball tournaments are becoming big money. Players are really talented. We were all just having a good time. There are pictures of my parents with a cup of coffee in one hand and a cigarette in another, trying to hold the paddle. Or cocktail hour pickleball games in the summer, enjoying some vacation time. Now, of course, it's big business. It's equipment, clothing, sponsorships, big people involved. And of course, if they're trying to make it a Olympic sport. So we now need 57 countries, I think, and I think they're up to 40. So it's changed a lot. Rules have changed.
What are major players in the pickleball and its growth?
What are what?
The major players in pickleball.
Right now? Mm-hmm. To be honest, I don't know, because honestly, for me, the game is still really just a family fun game. When we came to where we live here in Massachusetts, we put a pickleball court on our property. Everybody that lives in our little community here play tennis. Now they all play pickleball, and they all love playing pickleball. And that's the way the game develops. It can be fun and competitive, but it's always fun first. The major players, there's a teenage girl and her mother that win everything. The two men's doubles players are actually from Baltimore, and I don't remember their last names, but they're from Baltimore Country Club. I think they were big paddle tennis players, and then they took up pickleball. And I'd have to ask who they are. But one of our local neighbors here, Erin McHugh, who wrote the book Pickleball is Life, she just went to Flushing Meadows to play in a seniors tournament and won her age group. So it's all levels, but she also came to play here just for fun. So it's a game that can resonate with anybody. 4-year-olds who are just learning to hold a paddle, and 85-year-olds who used to be big tennis players or squash players. And that's the beauty of the game, I think.
Who are people behind the scenes in pickleball?
So we talked about Mr. Dundon, who is, put together Pickleball Inc. There are all kinds of companies who are taking advantage of the popularity of the game that are doing clothing lines and paddles and so forth. Then there are two organizations. There's the American Pickleball, APBA, American Pickleball Association, and then there's a second group. And to show how big the games become, they were fighting each other on who got to have the Hall of Fame for pickleball. I think they've resolved that issue. So there is a founders court on Bainbridge Island where the three founders are highlighted, which is delightful, and they do tournaments all the time, and both associations sponsor different tournaments and so forth, but I'm not 100% sure who's the head of those anymore. They develop new rules, like the way you score. Do you know how to score pickleball?
All I know is that you can't be in the kitchen. That's all I know.
Well, so the kitchen was my father. So we had two family friends, the Browns. The Brown family friends rented in the same place we all rented in the summer, and the two sons were tall. And when the teenagers started playing against the adults, they would just stand at the net, and the adults couldn't get anything by them. So my father laid down, and from the net and to his top of his head, and said, "Okay, draw a line on either side of the net." And now they said you can't go in there unless the ball bounces in there, and that's where the kitchen came from. So it was called the no volley zone. But I think Joanne Pritchard, Joel's wife, said, if you can't stand the heat, stay out of the kitchen. So that was one of the rules that they made up rules every time they played. And some of them resonated long term, and some of them long gone by the wayside. For example, there's a huge tree right on the court. I mean, the line of the court is here, the tree is here. And you literally got penalized initially if you hit it near the tree, because they couldn't go back without hurting themselves. So they had this funny rule about it. But, all of those rules didn't make it to the current rule book. The other rules are things like one day they let you bounce the ball before you serve. The next day you're not allowed to bounce the ball before you serve. They keep changing them. I don't keep up with a lot of that, but so.
Can you tell me more about your uncle and when he was like a public office?
So in fairness, I called Joel Pritchard, who was a congressman for 12 years, but he limited himself to be, he said he would only run for 7 terms. So he ended up 14 years, and then he retired from congressional life. But his parents, Frank Sr. and his wife, owned the main house on this beach, and then there were these little outhouses, not real outhouses, but houses around that main house, and that was the Senior Pritchards, and you weren't allowed to go in there as a child because that was off limits, because they were older and they were adults. But there was a little house that we rented, and then Joanne and Joel and their 4 children lived in another house. And then there was the cottage that was right where the badminton court was, that then got lowered to be the pickleball. Then there was, a shed. So there were just sort of a whole conglomeration of houses, and we all sort of every summer would go and rent, with a lot of other families coming and going. And then down Pleasant Beach, which is on the west side of Bainbridge Island, there was Barney McCallum and his family, and then other families both sides. That all sort of the kids just, those were the days you could walk into town and get an ice cream, and We did things like paint rocks and sell them to our parents and our parents' friends to make money to get ice cream. And it was a very easy time and place to be in the summers. There was a cherry farm across the street. You could climb and get cherries, blackberry and raspberry bushes. We'd go out and dig for clams in the morning. I mean, it was pretty idyllic. The court is still there. I was there a couple of months ago with my husband. We went to the Founders Court, and then we went over to see the old homestead. And people, I guess, go and revere the aura of being at the original court, which just cracks me up. Because a piece of cement with lines on it. That's all it was. So, yeah. So Joel, you asked me about Joel. So Joel was a public servant. Joanne was a wonderful support. Stayed in Seattle. They lived in Seattle proper the rest of the year, but Joel lived in Washington. My father and he actually roomed together because, you know, congressmen don't make much, and so they had roommates while they were working. He was a terrific congressional representative for his district in Seattle. Later became chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. I interned for him as just graduating from college for 3 months. And at 2 months and 3 weeks, he said, "So where are you going?" And I said, "Can I stay working here?" He said, "No." So he stuck to his guns, and I ended up working for another congresswoman. But he was in the old day of great leaders in the political world, and just a fun guy. His son Frank is the one who was 13, 14, has many more active memories of that time. So I sent him an email, and I know he's going to talk with you more.
Thank you.
Yeah, and he'll tell you all about his dad. Yeah.
Can you talk about, I remember we were on the phone, there was a really good quote about him spreading the game of pickleball after each speech.
After each speech, he would do what?
He would want to play pickleball afterwards.
Well, you know, in the beginning, particularly trying to promote the game, so we were gone. But yeah, he would use it because you can't patent a game, as you know, but they could patent and incorporate the game from a standpoint of equipment and rules and so forth. And that's where Barney became very helpful. And later his son, Barney's son, David McCallum, sort of took on the marketing of pickleball. And they started with a boxed set of, I think, 4 paddles and a net you could string up and some balls and the rules of pickleball. I'm sure David still has that. I don't know if he still has one of those original boxes. I have a picture of it, which I'll show you later. And they tried to promote the game. So Joel would, you know, inevitably, wherever he was, try and get people to appreciate the game, a little bit of a marketing tool. Yeah, but Barney was the marketing guy. He owned an envelope company, so he was used to sales. And so he was the one that did a lot of promoting, which was great for the game. So that's why the Northwest, within their realm, so, you know, Joel's a congressman, Barney is a businessman from that area, they were the ones that really pushed the game forward. My father, wherever we went, would do whatever he could, but we lived in, you know, different circumstances. We traveled and moved often, and so he wasn't quite as ongoing a marketing person for the game. But
take a break right here.